because I work with executives generally, it is somewhat top down. And it should be a little bit top down at the company level, because you do need to have that. You do need to make some decisions. I did have a customer recently who is German, and I point that out because the Germanic culture tends to be quite consensus driven, and they're very consultative. A little bit different to the Anglo culture. Sometimes Anglos are a little bit more willing to be top down, and then the Germans are a little bit more collaborative like that. So yeah, this team was very, very collaborative, and they really went through that process. And I found it incredibly painful because I'm a bit more used to a bit more assertive leadership. However, it worked really well. So what they did is they basically spent the time getting those people and making them talk. And they had a big Teams meeting, and they used Teams to, everyone raised their hand whenever they had an idea or a question, and we'd listen to everybody. So it didn't, we had about 15 people in this group. It wasn't just CEO and the 4 C-level execs. It was CEO, 4 C-levels, and 10 or so others, right? And they'd raise hands and say, well, listen, we'd ask them questions, but the only way you can do this is by having a manager who's assertively trying to get that engagement from people. Because if the manager is not, then it doesn't really matter what else you do, that people won't jump in very easily. So when you're saying how to encourage teams to join the bidirectional approach, the one thing, the fundamental thing is having a leader in the team, a manager in the team, or the seniors, to be very assertive about getting that engagement and making sure we're listening and setting up systems and having that raise your hand and we'll listen to you. And only one person talked at a time, and it worked really well, but it took a long time. The other way that I've seen work that I often do is I have the senior people or the managers consult and set the objectives, and then I get them to delegate the key results to their team. Now, what's going on here is that you're having the real direction, like this is the strategy, coming from executives or the senior people who, in many cases, that is their job. That is their job to set that strategy, and that is where they spend their time. But you're making sure that it's getting that backwards and forwards by having the people who are doing the work, the people who are engaged in this. If you're familiar with the chickens and the pigs, having the pigs who are committed to breakfast, having them involved in coming up with the actual numbers and the actual metrics, and saying, you want to do this? Well, here's how we think we can get there. Here's how our success looks like. But you need to then have that consultation at the top. So they're the 2 mechanisms that I use. But I also do think that we shouldn't be too afraid of having some level of top-down guidance from this. It is partially about getting a strategy and clarifying it. And I think it's very hard to do that in a completely consensus-driven way. You do need some level of leadership and someone saying what we're trying to achieve here. So it works in some ways when you have that bottom up. If you have had an incredibly clear strategy communication of what we're trying to achieve here and what your role is and how this works, then I can probably rely on people a bit more. But it really does depend on having that clarity in the first place. Like, think about the garden gnomes. They're not going to know what they're trying to achieve. When I was at Google, we did know quite a lot about what we were trying to achieve because it was talked about repeatedly, not just through our OKRs historically, but just in what we were doing. So we all knew it, so we were able to suggest them quite easily. But to me, the change is quite a slow change. It requires both ends.